to the Aboriginal channel. On this episode, I'm going to pick up where I left off at, reading from the book 103 Amazing Facts About the Black Indian of the Western Hemisphere. I read 1 through 15 in the first episode. I'll pick up from there. Dark-skinned natives, indigenous to the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, who embraced the Spanish culture during the colonial era, either by choice or by force, have found themselves engulfed or assimilated into Spanish culture and the Spanish language. Now most of them have lost the knowledge of themselves and their true identity. They too have been reclassified as Latino or Hispanic. I did a separate show on numbers 17 through 21, so I'll scroll through those. Nat Turner, Paul Cuff, Crispus Attucks, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Harriet Tubman, then Mark Vassy, Elijah Poole, aka the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, amongst millions of others, were indigenous to the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians. The titles Black American and African American are fake, inappropriate European colonized titles to keep indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, under a spell of ignorance. The titles Black American and African American were purposely created to psychologically and spiritually disconnect indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, from their true motherland, which is right under their feet. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, a South Carolina Cherokee, started and promoted the fake title of African American that has been imposed upon Black Indians indigenous to the Western Hemisphere region. It has become quite profitable to brainwash the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, into thinking that Africa is their native land. There is a campaign currently underway by the U.S. government and the U.S. government-sponsored natives that preaches a doctrine that says that the Black Indian of the Western Hemisphere is a result of African mixture that has not always dwelt in the Western Hemisphere. Most so-called Black Americans are so-called African Americans. When asked if any Native Americans are in their family, at least 95% respond with the answer yes. In addition to this, most so-called Black Americans are so-called African Americans are also able to give you the name of the tribe that their relative comes from. Thus, the so-called Black American or African American oddly insist upon calling themselves Black American or African American instead of referring to themselves by way of the ancestral tribal name that has survived in their family, which in essence is their true nationality. Most so-called Black Americans or so-called African Americans find it difficult to accept themselves as being native or indigenous to the Western Hemisphere because of programmed fabricated images of native people in the Western Hemisphere. Fake images of their own indigenous ancestors has been routinely drilled into their psyche since birth. The Black Indian image does not register within their psyche because of the fake imagery programming that the U.S. government has instilled into their minds of how native or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere look. The spirit of so-called Black Americans or so-called African Americans tells them one thing, while the programmed fake image of their own ancestors says another. This leads to inner conflict. The U.S. school system and the media have been the two biggest giants behind programming into the masses fake fabricated images of native or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians. Number 30. Native or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, built pyramids and pyramid mounds, just like the ancient Egyptians. This synonymous comparison of both cultures from opposite sides of the world is because they both were genetically linked. They both are the same people. Pause. So I don't quite agree with that fully. Now it says that they're the same people. They're not the same people. So the way I look at that is that right here in Samuel G. Morton's book, An Inquiry into the Distinct Characteristics of the Aboriginal Race of America, says that the present age, however, is marked by a noble zeal for these inquiries, which are daily making man more conversant with the organic structure, the mental character, and the national affinities of the various and widely scattered tribes of the human family. Among these, the Aboriginal inhabitants of America claim our special attention. So within the various and widely scattered tribes of the human family exist the Aboriginal inhabitants of Egypt and also the Aboriginal inhabitants of America, which they're separate, but share similar organic structures, mental characters, and national affinities. As far as the pyramid mounds and the pyramids that were built over here in the Western Hemisphere out of stone and brick and earth, some of those were built many, many years before anything was built in Egypt. And Egypt is not on the other side of the world. It's in Northeast Africa, right across the Atlantic Ocean. Number 31. During the time of Pangea, all of the continents on the planet Earth were one mass of land. People lived and thrived during the time of Pangea. There is a large explanation as to why pyramid builders in the Eastern Hemisphere and pyramid builders in the Western Hemisphere have cultures that are incredibly synonymous. The continents continue to move. Some move 4 inches a year. The continents will one day become one mass of land again. The continents are currently separated at this time. However, the genetic link of beings from Pangea never parted. Pangea, to me, is all the land mass today where it is, along with the Atlantic continent. Here in this book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly in 1882, says Chapter 1, the purpose of the book. This book is an attempt to demonstrate several distinct and novel propositions. These are that there once existed in the Atlantic Ocean opposite the mouth of the Mediterranean Sea a large island, which was the remnant of an Atlantic continent and known to the ancient world as Atlantis. Then when we go over to the book America, being the latest and most accurate description of the New World from 1671, there's a map in it. So in the book, it says that there once existed in the Atlantic Ocean, opposite the mouth of the Mediterranean Sea, a large island, which was the remnant of an Atlantic continent. So on the map from the book America from 1671, you can see that the mouth of the Mediterranean Sea is right here in North Africa. And then when you look right here in the ocean between Canada and Africa, you see a bunch of little islands. But then when you look up a current map like this one, you see North Africa, the mouth of the Mediterranean Sea right here, the Western Hemisphere, but no islands right here. Nothing is here in the Atlantic Ocean. But in 1671, there was definitely some islands right there, which I presume were the remnants of the Atlantic continent. So when the book says during the time of Pangea, all of the continents on the planet Earth were one mass of land, the only thing that's missing is the Atlantic continent that would have connected the Western Hemisphere to the Eastern. And it goes on to say that it's an explanation as to why pyramid builders in the Eastern Hemisphere and pyramid builders in the Western Hemisphere have cultures that are incredibly synonymous. Goes on to say in the book, The Antediluvian World, that Atlantis was the region where man first rose from a state of barbarism to civilization, that it became in the course of ages a populous and mighty nation from whose overflowings. Now, when it says from whose overflowings, that means the culture on Atlantis spread through to these other regions, which was its overflowings. The shores of the Gulf of Mexico, the Mississippi River, the Amazon, the Pacific coast of South America, the Mediterranean, the west coast of Europe and Africa, the Baltic and the Black Sea, and the Caspian were populated by civilized nations. So pretty much all of those areas during the time of Atlantis shared the same culture to one degree or another. Goes on to say that the mythology of Egypt and Peru represented the original religion of Atlantis, which was sun worship. Through the history books, which has all been a lie. So therefore, if it's a lie, then what's the truth? If it's a lie, then what's the truth?